We welcome you to this day in Columbus, Ohio, in September. That is like July. Can you believe this weather? Isn't it beautiful? And my daughter just called from St. Louis, and we're going to St. Louis for a celebration. And she said, Mom, be sure you wear summer clothes. It's going to be 90 and 93. So happy days of what was called always the Indian summer. And we are into it and celebrating art, a true gift to the city of Columbus. And we have with us Jesus. Now you say your last name, Walle.
Yes.
Ah. Jesus was saying to me, he is from the Latino community. His parents were Mexican and moved. Actually, they were called to move to it was Nashville.
Yes.
Nashville, Tennessee, because relatives were setting up a restaurant chain. So they come from Mexico to Nashville. And is this where you were born, Jesus?
It was, yeah. I was born over in Nashville, Tennessee. And just like Ellen was saying, my parents were called up to help out with a restaurant chain that one of our relatives owns and still owns to this day. So my parents kind of acted as the trainers for these restaurants, and so anytime the restaurant was planning on opening a new location, my parents would kind of go ahead and ahead of that town and get all the workers together and do. I'm assuming they would do some of the hiring process as well. So in that hiring process, they would also do a lot of the back of house training, whether that's like cooking and like sanitation and dishwashing and all that stuff, to food prep, and then also teaching front of house situations like being a waiter, waitress, doing cashier operations.
And you got to witness that growing up, huh?
Yes.
Now, and I was sharing with Jesus, we just came back from New Mexico with a family wedding celebration. And every time we would go to a Mexican restaurant, I just wanted to order guacamole and chips. And somebody said, wouldn't you like a main entree? No, I just want the guacamole and chips. Delicious food. And thank you for bringing to your family, thank you for bringing your culture to our United States from Mexico. What a courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
And then, as you were growing up in southern Illinois, mainly.
Yeah. So there was grew up in a small town, probably about 5,000 people. So we had a Walmart. That was our big thing. And anyway, so I grew up there the majority of my life. I did spend 2 years over in Mexico to actually go to school over there. So I was kind of back and forth a little bit. But for the most part, I spent my time over in Chamoy, Illinois, and a lot of the values that I have come from that place. And so now it's, I'm here in Columbus. I came over here for art school, and Columbus is perfect for me just because of there's enough energy and creative energy here.
Mm-hmm.
And also just the city is interesting in and of itself. And there's just a lot of lively people here.
And you went to Columbus College of Art and Design, and Jesus was telling me that for some time he was deciding what he wanted to do because he didn't want to go into sports as such, and he loved to just work quietly by himself and create things. So he goes to art school, loves it. And is that where you met Randy? Randy, your wife, right?
Yes.
All
so
right,
my
Randy,
wife is over
stand
here
up
in the black.
here. How wonderful. In meeting a friend at CCAD who then introduced you to Randy.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then next month on October 4th will be our 3-year anniversary. So.
A round of applause for 3 years. Wow. And in the meantime, you're creating these emojis. How
Yes.
creative in itself. As you were saying to me, showing me your exhibit out there, the evolution of this emoji came about because you thought, well, usually this is a very isolating thing, but you want to make a statement with these. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So.
And they are behind
Yeah,
us.
and they're actually projected behind us. So this is, I call them Latinomoji. And part of that is because I wanted to have them reflect my experience of my Mexican heritage and upbringing. So these are a lot of items that I've chosen that I particularly have had a lot of experiences with. And this project came about because of just technology and just I had some frustrations, but I also saw an opportunity for something new. So within, I'm sure some of you have used emoji in some form or fashion, but even just being able to text a simple smiley face, or whether you're sending a few hearts or something, these mean something to you. And it's very much in the same fashion that I wanted to create things that meant something to me. And out of my own personal experiences, I really saw an opportunity for like a universal experience for those of the same culture, or even those that just love Mexican culture.
Can you give us an example of any one or two of those?
Yeah. So, for example, if you look at the second one, the Vicks Vapor Rub, so that is a very common, even here in America, like Vicks is pretty common, in its use. Essentially, what ended up happening with that, and why I chose that one, is because they basically, for lack of an expression, essentially, if you are, if you have a headache, or if your arm is chopped off, or, you get hit by a car, just put Vicks on it. It'll be fine. So Mexicans treat that as like their cure-all, and, if you, you died because you didn't put Vicks on. So, and then we also, let's see. The top right, that is actually, it's a little candy. So I noticed too that while I was doing this is my first round of Latinomoji, but I noticed that I was doing a lot of candy because it's something that I really enjoyed growing up. So yeah, the top one, it's like a little, like, how do I say? It's like a peanut cake. And it's like a little tiny, like, I don't know, probably, can't really think of a good size reference at the moment, but essentially it's like compacted peanut, and it's the whole, like, it's very honorable if you can actually unwrap it and not break it, because it's very brittle, and so that's kind of like the hallmark achievement if you can do that. And then, so...
But we are left with a lingering taste of that. Delicious, huh?
Yes. And then there's other things that are very, that are also just like signature items within Mexican culture. Like you have, if you look on the fourth row, on the fourth column, you have this like little, it's called a concha, and it's the one that has like the arching lines, like the dotted lines kind of thing. So it's right by the cilantro one, the cilantro leaves. That is actually called a concha, which is a type of pan dulce, which is just Mexican bread. Within the culture, it's anytime that you go to a Mexican bakery, like those are probably the easiest ones to spot and to see. He knows.
My wife is part Mexican, so I know the Corona and the hot sauce.
Yes.
Those are two of my favorites.
Yes. Yeah, we have the Corona, which has obviously made its impact here in America, and also the hot salsa, which is Valentina. that is made over in the state of Jalisco. So that's what that like mark that's on the middle of its like label. That's what that state is, or that's what that image is.
And the candle there in the middle.
Yeah. Let me see if I
That's
can
right
clear
from
that up a little
Mexico.
bit.
Is that the Guadalupe?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah.
There we go. So yeah, the candle in the middle is the Lady of Guadalupe. So anytime you go to a family member's house, they usually have some kind of this tall candle. It isn't always the Lady of Guadalupe, but it's usually her or some kind of saint or Jesus or, you know, something that's very that's associated with the Catholic and Christian faith. And so I used to see those literally everywhere. And if it's not on a candle, it's on a calendar, or it's on some kind of big, like, illuminated picture with a frame that has lights on it and everything.
Well, you brought that here to the Cultural Arts Center. We were just amazed that we had a Mass of Our Lady of Guadalupe here in the last month out in the courtyard. And your singing, your culture was just such an artistic and spiritual gift. So we
Yeah.
thank you for that tradition. Hmm?
Yeah. And that's something that is just a very strong presence in Mexico. Like, it's just part of the cultural identity that it's very hard to actually, even if you have people that are not believers of the faith, they would still find comfort in those items just as a cultural identification. So
You
even
know
if
who just said that recently? Okay, this is amazing as you're saying that. Recently, in terms of her coming back, Georgia O'Keeffe, having died at 1986, she was 99 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I visited the place where she lived a couple weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And that's Abiquiu, New Mexico. And one of the remarks she made in the book I'm reading about her is exactly what you said. She kind of gazed at it, enjoyed it, with the people living next door in the St. Thomas Church, and said it was like seeing the rest of the world. So that's a beautiful culture that you share with us.
Yeah. And let's see, I'm trying to think of what else.
What's the yellow one next to the cornmeal?
The yellow one is actually a mango.
Ah.
Part of the reason why I chose a mango is because a lot of food that they have there, they incorporate mango with it. A lot of candy has mango, which is another. It's not something that I particularly have noticed here in America, but a lot of the combinations that they use for candy is mango, and they usually have some kind of chili powder and lime that's added to it. And so if you're not used to that kind of, if you're not used to that flavor, it can be a very jarring experience for some.
What's the one next to the Corona?
That is actually it's called Duvalin, and it's essentially like a condensed milk candy. And if you see right under it, there's like a little like white spoon like object. So the way that this candy is sold is you have the little packet of it, and then you also they give you a spoon with it so that you can actually scoop it out. If you don't have the spoon, then you don't really have the full experience on that one. What else are you guys wanting to ask on?
Well, is that like a Mardi Gras, those masks? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So the one on the left is actually El Santo, which is a very famous, iconic Mexican luchador. He actually, when he was buried with his mask on, which is just how like serious, like Mexicans take their professional wrestling is And I'm sure that they had like this whole like ceremony with all the other like luchadores that knew him and knew his family and stuff like that. But yeah, he did die with his mask on, and that was by his request. So that was part of the culture that I learned about, not super early in my childhood, but I would say more in my teenage years. I learned more about lucha libre and that whole culture of professional wrestling. And then the black one right next to it is actually from a show called Sábado Gigante. So there was this, it's like a variety show, and it was hosted by this man named Don Francisco. And it was usually on this channel called Univision, which is, I'm sure some of you have at least heard it at some point. So what the variety show was is that they would have famous people talk on it, and they would have a bunch of games leading up to the talk. But anyway, they would also have competitions. And so they would have the singing competition that the show was actually really famous for. And they would have random people from the audience participate in singing. And so when there was a contestant that was terrible, this guy would come out. It almost looked like an executioner because he was clothed with black from head to toe, and he would come out with this trumpet, and once you heard the tune of the trumpet, it knew you were done, because that was his way of saying, we're cutting you off, that's over. What else do you guys have questions on?
What is just a third one in the top row, the round yellow?
Oh, that one is actually a lime wheel. A lime wheel, like a sliver of lime. Yeah, it's a little hard to see on the projector over here, but so I put that one because of just how prominent the lime taste is in a lot of food. And if it's not in the food, then they definitely have a lot of lime slices for you to put on your food.
I thought it was for the corona.
That too.
The one below it.
The one below it is a little packet of it's a pack of gum, but they're called they're cannels, or very similar to like chiclets. You see those a lot over in culture. Yeah, and yeah, even here in America, those types of that type of gum is still kind of popular. Yes.
And the glass that's next to this under the mask, that would be full of watermelon juice, would it?
Oh, so this bottom one that has the right by the nopales. So that one is actually a mangonada, which is like it's a frozen mango blended beverage. And then the red stuff that's above it and below it is I'm identifying that as like chamoy, which is chamoy is very interesting because everybody makes it totally different, but it's made from salt, some kind of like chili powder, usually lime is thrown in there, and it's a mixture of that and fermented like prunes or like nectarines or peaches. Everybody has their own mixture of how they do it, so no one like chamoy like recipe is quite the same, so everybody tries to make their like own signature flavor for it.
I thought that yellow one with looks like a wheel was the lemon thing, or
Oh, that one down there, right by the candle and the sandal. So that one is a chicharrón, and what that is, so there's two types. You have like the real chicharrón, which is like fried up like pig intestines, which are delicious, and then you also have this one, which is the harina version or the flour version. So it's just deep fried flour, and it puffs up. And usually they put a lot of the salsa valentina that was up there earlier, and they also put lime on it as well. Yes.
Can you get that drink at La Mexicana?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm sure that at some places they would have it. I know that there's a place over on Cleveland Avenue that just opened up somewhat recently called Mi Dulce Vida, and it's over by the, let's see, it's over by like the Turkey Hill on Cleveland Avenue, so it's like kind of like north of Morris. So it's a Mexican Nieveria, like ice cream shop, and they also sell like fresh water and popsicles and ice cream and all that stuff over there. But I know they for sure make it. Mangonada. Yeah. Yeah, so just so it's the word mango, and then the added is like N-A, yeah, kind of like that.
Where's the hot chocolate?
The hot chocolate is actually in my next series of it, which, so my projected amount of these is to have 80 of them. This is just the first 20. And so I've already got the second set finished. I just have to write up descriptions and start releasing them on social media. And my idea is that once I get the full projected 80 finished, is to get an estimate from an app developer, whether it's like a freelance person or a developer agency, get an estimate on what it would take to actually make it into a keyboard that you can download on your smartphone. And then in terms of how to go about it, I could either do some kind of crowdfunding campaign and have people put money towards it and then they would get it, or I would somehow do that and then either charge for it to go on like on Android and like iOS or like the Apple store. So my idea is to make them, put them on those services and then have people download them so that they can, even though I have my own context and my own experience with these objects, as you send emojis to your friends or your family, you create your own context. And very much like, I was telling Ellen earlier that language is a very fluid thing. And so we have words that, people have held on to that eventually go away. And then we have new words that come back or are created. And then we have, even older words that somehow come back into the vocabulary, like tablet and, whatever else, scrolling, things like that. But with the Latinomoji, I really wanted to, give new context to things that I'm familiar with and that, people from Mexican culture are familiar with. And so as you, send your emojis, as you couple them with different things, they create different meanings. And so very much, I'm letting people know that like these things are important, but I want you to create your own experiences with them as well. Yes.
How, if you were to put these on, a website or whatever, how do you imagine people using them?
I would imagine people using them, even just in regular everyday conversation. So if you wanted to text your son or daughter or your sister or somebody that or a friend that you went to school with, and you said, hey, you want to meet me for for tacos, and then there's an emoji for tacos. I mean, they have one now, but I would create my own version of what that would be like, and you would be able to couple that with you could couple that with the cilantro or the Corona, or you could couple that with the lime, and you kind of create your own small experience with these emoji and with these icons.
And we use emojis in texting a lot, but they're kind of boring. As I'm looking at yours, I'm thinking, oh, how wonderful to enrich that whole choice.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and this project did come out of some personal frustration for me where, I didn't have certain things that I wanted to communicate with. And I'm sure that, everybody has their own version of, I wish they had something for this. I'm sure some of you have probably said that quite a bit. I wish they had maybe
Yes.
a knitting emoji, or maybe a biker's emoji, or some, like, a bunch of cooking emojis, or I don't know. Yes.
I had an email yesterday from a friend of mine. He said, I'm looking everywhere for a screaming emoji. She said, one emoji that shows somebody screaming.
But yeah, so this came out of some personal frustration, and so I saw the opportunity, and I was like, I want to create something that other people can connect with and other people can use to communicate with. And it's also helped me see this part of our language within society of, how can I impact that aspect of how we communicate with each other.
The next step is how to actually reach the people that this could be applied to. Do you have to have an agent for something like that, or can you go directly to those corporations that might vet something like this?
That process is, I have thought about how to go about that. Even though at this point I'm technically still in like the creation stage where I just make them. I have thought ahead a little bit, but haven't quite figured out some of that part of the process. Because I could go where, I could do it all by myself and just have people crowdfund it, or I could approach some entity that would pay for it in full and actually take care of it for me. As far as which way that'll happen, essentially we'll just cross that bridge when we get there. But as my main goal is to get this on people's phones or whatever people use to communicate with, that they can actually have new experiences.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Get the emails of everybody in here, so when you're ready to present them, you can let us know and we can buy them.
Yeah.
Are you aware, speaking of communication, of the U.S. postage stamps that have the Mexican food on them?
Oh, no.
I'm hungry every time I put the tamale stamp up.
You should send me some of those, and I will be just as hungry. Yes.
They could be used when you mail something. Generally, I stick a seal on the back of it. You lick the envelope and it doesn't want to stick. I put a seal on it, and those little things would be great.
Yeah.
As stamps.
Yeah.
What about a casino?
Oh, like a slot? That would be fun.
Jesus, what was the medium that you've used to create this? What paints? What kind of approach to drawing?
Yeah, so on some of these, I did have to write out a list ahead of time of like, oh, these could be ones that I do, and as I complete the list, the next part of the process would be some of them do require a little bit of sketching out and kind of figuring out what's the best way to present this, and I also had to take into consideration the format of how it would be, like once it's like the final delivery of that, how would that be presented. In this case, it would be in it would be like on a text dialogue, and so I had to think about, okay, how big would these actually look once they're being in use, and because depending on how many emoji you use, if you use a lot, they come out small, but if you use like 1 or 2 or 3, they come out kind of bigger. And so I did have to design with that in mind of, I can't have a super huge amount of detail because then it just gets lost and it becomes really non-important at that point. And so I really had to think about almost in essence what makes this this. Yes. And so
Blue background for
so this blue background is actually the background. If you have an iPhone, this is the blue that goes when you like send a message. And so the way that these, I have two versions of these. So this, I have the blue, the one with the blue, and then I also have a transparent version where there's nothing in the background. But that would be like if I'm like sending something, whatever the background of that channel, the delivery of that would show up, and not like the blue background. So.
I got one question, man. Is Modelo older than Corona?
That's a great question. I should probably go to the brewery and find that out. Have some samples too. I think they are from the same like parent company, I think, but I don't know which one came first. Out of Corona and Modelo, which one is older?
Those are the two best Mexican beers.
Yes.
When you were at Columbus College of Art and Design, like what would have been your senior project in 2014, looking back a few years?
You know, it's my my educational experience was interesting just because there was a lot of transition and a lot of, you know, at that time I think I was, let's see, 3 years ago, 23. At 23, who really knows what they're doing? A lot of that was figuring out, you know, what am I genuinely interested in, and what do I, and in a sense, like once I really didn't start to come into my own until after I graduated, and really started to ask, you know, especially since, you know, once you're out of school, you know, all of your bills kind of hit you, and your, you know, real life actually sets in, where you have to go and work a job, or you have to go and do something productive to society, and not just go to school. You know, part of that was, what do I actually care about, and how do I want to go about making that happen? And I think something that I've realized, and I keep realizing, is that nothing really is off limits as long as you have a plan for it. And I think in some ways people are actually afraid to actually write down exactly what they want, because they're afraid of what if it actually happens. And I'm sure a lot of people, you know, just think, oh, eventually it'll happen, someday it'll get there, but you really do have to have a plan of attack and say, you know what, if I want to make, you know, $500,000 a year, you know, that's realistic if you have a plan for it. And I'm sure some of the more sagely people here in the room would be able to say, you know what, you do have to have a plan, and you do have to, you know, you have to have energy to go after these things, and you do have to have a reason to do it. And so,
Did you enjoy painting and drawing and all of those disciplines that you have to go through in school?
Yeah, I think what I loved about my education at Columbus College of Art and Design was that my particular field of study, which was illustration, the courses really teach you a lot of the traditional mediums when you first start out, and then as you progress, they teach you more of the digital formats and mediums. And so each artist in their own field of study really can take those set of skills and use them however they wish. So some people decide, you know what, I don't care about any of the digital stuff, I'm just going to stick with the traditional medium. And other people do the reverse. But what's nice about having a career in the arts is that there's no set way to do it. And that's also the same double-edged sword where there's no set way to do it. And so and so the plus side is that if you want to make your, career doing, digital or traditional, you can do that. But if you don't have people to look up to and people to say, oh, they're doing this, how can what can I take from their experience and their expertise and apply that to my own practice? And so for me personally, I like taking everything on a project-to-project basis. And so instead of just completely shutting out one area or the other, I look at the project and say, what does this project need? I don't need to come at this one project with everything, but what are the tools that I need to use to execute this? And so if my drawing tools are what are needed, I'll use those. If my painting tools are needed for this project, I'll use those. If my computer and my Photoshop skills and Illustrator skills and InDesign skills are required for it, I'll use it. But a lot of it is just figuring out what's the most fun and efficient way to make this happen. Because if you approach it from a purely efficient standpoint, you may not have fun. But if you have
Tell us about that. Tell us how you have fun with all of this.
I think what makes it fun is that it's very much like reading. Well, for me anyway, it's very much like reading, where within reading, there's all of these different genres and these different sections that you can read about. If you were to give me, a textbook of just purely like procedural things, I would die. But if you give me something on, for me personally, something that is, about human psychology or human behavior and why people do things the way that they do, I could read all about that, or learning about the creative process, or learning about how to cook and why certain things go the way that they do. Very much in the creative sense, don't do the things that you're not interested in. I think some people, even if they're talented in a certain area, but they don't enjoy that area, see if you can transfer some of those skills to another area of creativity. Because if you get stuck into doing things that you don't necessarily care about, then it shows in your artwork. You can't fake that. Even if you spend a few, if you have a rush project or something, it shows. And some of us are just a little bit better at hiding or just pretending like that's the way it was supposed to be. Yes, you.
Could you explain, I see you got, how many colors do you have in there? Is that 3 or 4 colors, and the process that you figured out the colors that you wanted, and how it reacts with the customer base that back and forth, because color has a lot of potential.
Yeah, and so what's really nice is that because these will usually be on a digital format, I have a whole different range of colors that I can work with as opposed to like just the print stuff. So what makes it nice is that things can actually be brighter and kind of, I can take what an object is, and even if I can just exaggerate the color, even just a little bit, and really make the essence of that color be more prominent, then I will. So for these, in each one of these, there really isn't more than maybe 4 colors. There's really a max of 4 colors if I ever get to that, but pretty much it's usually at least 2 or 3. And part of that is just because, and some of them even just have 1. But a lot of that goes back to how do you take an object and really just strip it down to its essence and still be able to communicate this is the object. And I think some people, I'm also pretty good at going the other direction where, how can more means more. I can go that direction. But there's value in saying less is more as well. And when you can really break something down to its essentials, we're cave painting essentially. And so, when you think about the first drawings or the first paintings over in France, in the caves, those people were just trying to think about, what does a bull look like? They weren't trying to make it perfect. They were referencing their experience with the object and putting that on a surface down to its essence. Yes.
You think mankind, like a stop sign and carols, the whole world goes together and tries to figure out what symbol is best for, certain things, like danger, this and that, radiation.
Yeah.
You go around the world and you see the same signal, signs and this and that. The process that the world has went through to get them symbols. It's simple.
Yeah, and I think luckily that there's communities around trying to make things universal and to depict what things are. This is a truly universal signal for explosion or radiation or biohazard or things like that. There's communities set up for that will approve and make sure that all of that stuff goes through. And in some way, these are kind of a more, because I would say those would be more like utilitarian symbols and iconography. These are kind of more on the other side where it's all about personal flair, so to speak, the creativity side of it. So while they do share the same idea of, we have to communicate a thing, this is more on the creative and fun side.
You're saying that people can use them to express anything they want to express within their own background, as opposed to male and female signs on doors. You don't want people to misconstrue.
Right.
Could we just see what those look like with the light on? See the colors with the lights on?
So like I was mentioning earlier, this blue background, if you have an iPhone, that is the blue. That's the blue color that comes with when you send a message. And so I was thinking at some point that on one of these series, I wanted to do a green background. So it was still kind of with like an iPhone, where if you're sending it to a non-iPhone user, it'll do a green text box. I personally have an iPhone, and so that's my experience, so that's kind of what I'm channeling it through. But I'm sure that I could connect with some of my friends that have Android. Yeah, go ahead and flip those back on.
Green thing, the cilantro, the leaves.
Yeah, that one down there is a cilantro leaf, which is also a key component in Mexican cuisine and food. What other questions did you guys have, whether it's about the emoji or the creative process or anything else? Yes?
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if it's relevant, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Go for it.
I just want to ask, do you regard yourself as falling into the category of having the temperament known as the melancholy temperament?
I have no idea. But
yeah, during Victorian times, the melancholy temperament was regarded as the dark or black temperament, when in actuality it turns out that the melancholy temperament is the most productive of all temperaments, and there's 4 of them.
I will actually have to look more into that. Personally. Yes. Yes.
I came in late, so maybe I missed it. What are the first four on the top?
So the first four are, so we have Tajin, we have Vicks Vapor Rub, Salsa Valentina, and then we also have, this one is a little tricky to say, but it's called Pelon Pelo Rico. So it's 3 words. And so that one is probably one of the ones that I have the most trouble explaining, because there's a few things that factor in to explaining what it actually is. So the very first one is I have to explain what the tamarind fruit is. And so if you don't know what a tamarind fruit is, what it is, it's a pod-like fruit that grows on trees, usually in bunches. And what it is that it has a thin layered shell on on the entire thing, and then it has pulp that you can either eat, or you can put it in water to make it into like a mixed water drink, or you can make it into candy. And each pod has a giant seed in the middle of it. And so Mexicans use the tamarind fruit for a lot of their candy. So if you can understand the candy, or if you can understand the fruit, then you can understand a lot of the flavor behind the candy. And so the next thing that they use is chili powder. And then they also, depending on which variety of the Pelon Pelo Rico that you get, they use larger increments of chili powder and lime to make it either spicier or milder. And so the way that this works is that it's an extruder, so you actually push up. So the green part has, it's like your cap, so to speak, or your instrument that extrudes, and then the bottom part is the push compartment, and so you push it up, and the tamarind fruit is somewhere in the middle, so that you can push up as much as you want or as little as you want. And the reason why it's called Pelon Pelo Rico is that when you extrude it up, it actually looks like hair, but really I would say it probably looks more like pasta shapes. So if you look at spaghetti, it looks more similar to that. So, but together it kind of looks more like spaghetti hair.
What was the first one? You said it, but I don't know what it is.
The first one is Tajin, and it's a chili and lime powdered seasoning that they use for fruit. You'll notice if you ever when they had the Latino festival here, you'll see people with cups of fruit. That's actually a super common thing that they do over in Mexico, and they just slice up a bunch of fruit, usually pineapple, mango, coconut, jicama, watermelon. I mean, basically, if they have it, they'll put it in a cup for you.
And I was last in Mexico. They stopped at a little stand and got us the wonderful little pineapples that are the sweetest things in the whole world. But then you put chili pepper on it. And
Yeah.
But it really was wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
Could that be used for online shopping at a grocery store?
Yes.
Okay, what I'm getting at is, you say you chose the beer one, and then you would go to the website, beer, and then like your corn or whatever fruit, you can go, there's like tomatoes,
Yeah.
The whole thing is, you got a simple tomato, but you might have 30 types of tomatoes in the store.
Yeah.
Automatically, you push the button, get the order in, online shopping, and then say, vapor rub. You push that vapor rub, and then you got a whole line of vapor rubs, or I can see how that would work in online shopping, because it would make it look quite quicker.
Yeah.
It would even work if you just were going to a grocery store and you weren't speaking Spanish. You could just show the pictures and get what you want.
I hadn't even thought about that, but that is actually a really good note that I am going to take, because a lot of it is, as I have more conversations with people about the Latinomoji, people come up with, you know, they say all of these really interesting things, and I'm like, oh, that, yes, I can see the use for that, or I can see the vision for that.
I can see the use in a grocery store type of a setting with one symbol. Then you have maybe 30 or 40 other ones you can go very quickly, and you can do your shopping. You know, like a piece of meat, and you get post the meat, and then you say you need steak at so many ounces, or hamburger. Twist the thing and send it to the online shopping, and they can pick it out for you.
And it would make it so creative.
I know.
Versus being boring, like fun.
Yeah, and part of my process too, so when I was putting these out on social media, just as like as my post, I would also include in my description of like, this is essentially the way I would format it was, here's my personal experience with this object, here's how like you can use it in a recipe if it's food, or here's where you can find it if it's on TV or something like that. And then I would also include, if you could buy it, I would also include, this is where you can find it. You can find it at Kroger, you can find it at, you know, Walmart, or you can find it online or something like that. So even as like, even as I would like post and things like that, my other purpose is, how do I give people the best impression of this object if they've never seen it or heard it or touched it or tasted it? And so part of that is just letting the viewer know, you know, this can be educational as well for you.
Jesus, as we were talking before this time of noon with Randy, you and Randy had been in Ireland, and we talked about my roots in Ireland.
Yeah.
But you know, we didn't talk about your roots in Mexico. Where is your family from in Mexico?
So my family is from primarily, so it's a town called Gonzales, and it's in the state of Tamaulipas, which is over on the Gulf side. It's right under Texas. So if you're like in Brownsville, or if you're in McAllen, Texas, and you cross the border, that's the state that is Tamaulipas. So within that state, Gonzales is located on the southeastern side of the state. And it's a tall state, very similar to Illinois, which is ironic for me because within those state structures, I grew up and knew about both within like their southeastern regions. So from the border, it's probably like an 8 to 10 hour drive. And your parents chose to come into the United States mainly because of the restaurant business. Yeah. Yeah, and it's been really interesting just to know, and I probably haven't been back to Mexico in, I would say, 12 years plus. So I still have friends there and family. A lot of my family, especially the the generations that have been there for a while, a lot of them are over there. Like both of my grandparents. Well, now I only have 2 grandmothers. Both of my grandfathers have passed away. But all of their children are mostly still there, and a lot of cousins are still down there, and so it's interesting to see how when I was last there, I was maybe around freshman year of high school, and so since then there's a lot of life events that have happened to everyone involved, and so it's always interesting to know how people change and how things are different, but also how things are the same in some way. Yes.
Yeah, I have one more question. The first picture, the one that's got the bottle of sauce?
It's a powder, but yes, yeah.
Okay, I was wondering whether or not in Mexico, whether or not it had reached as far as Victoria, Mexico. The reason why was because I seemed to recognize the bottle from where I was eating in a restaurant in Victoria, Mexico.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Get to Illinois?
So getting to Illinois, so because my parents had been a part of the restaurant business with one of my relatives, I mean, they had been doing it for a while, and then I was born in 1990 over in Nashville, and then my parents had just moved a few places because they had also, my relative had opened a few more restaurants, and so they would train people back of house and front of house. And so at one point when we got to Carmel, Illinois, my mom was just like, I'm done moving. we have 4 kids, we're done. And so that's where my mom and the 4 of us stayed. And so ever since then, like I think I started 2nd grade in Carmi, and then I graduated there with basically the same people that I started 2nd grade with. And so I love the town, love my experience there. But there were really good moments, and moments of I wish I could see my family over in Mexico, and just get to see them and hang out with them. And just like everybody else, like we think about people that we're not with, and we think about how we miss them, and whether we have actual pictures that we can reference back to and look at and enjoy those moments, or if they're miles away from us, like we still think about these people, and we still think about the impact that they had in our lives, whether that was bad experience or good experiences.
Jesus Walle, it's been wonderful being with you. And we offer our thoughts and condolences to your people in what they are going through in this earthquake.
Yes.
In Mexico. You must feel that.
Yeah.
As we do in hearing CNN report 26 children were killed in a school, we are with you and with them in our thoughts and our prayer. And we thank you for sharing this. Well, it's a legacy, and it's a present tense yet to happen. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And Randy, thank you for being with us. All right, take care.
Thank you, everybody.